What's your favorite James Cameron movie? He's given the white boys dreadlocks in this one, and I don't know how I feel about that. It's Dances with Wolves in Space, Fern Gully for the Labubu generation. It's day 86 of 365. Today's movie, Avatar. This one's directed by James Cameron and stars Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana in what was a giant watershed moment of film in 2009 and going into 2010, as you can see on my ticket stub. Now, I was lucky enough to be working at Best Buy when this movie came out, so this was part of the advertising on every single TV in the home theater department I worked in. Needless to say, I think I've seen this movie hundreds of times because of that. It was just on every day at work for an 8-hour shift. Not too much I could do about that. Seeing this one in the theater was exciting. It was huge. I'm a big fan of James Cameron, so Terminator and things like The Abyss, I love his sci-fi, and this promised to be even cooler, even bigger sci-fi than anything he had done to this point. I also made sure to see it in 3D, and that was an amazing experience. This was an era where 3D was really, really extra popular. They were trying to make everything 3D, but this is one of the few films that utilized that technology to add to the scale, to the depth. It was really a thing to behold in theaters. We just talked about the Final Destination movie that was in 3D, and I mentioned how everything pops out at the screen at you. This movie's not interested in doing that in ways that are so cartoonish, and instead will use it to show the scale size of a giant dump truck on this other planet that we've never been to. A dump truck made for clearing away trees that are so significantly larger than anything that you've seen on Earth that it's almost incomprehensible. And the 3D adds to that scale. Rewatching it in 2025, on the other hand, I have just been reminded how much of this is borrowed. I don't want to ever poo-poo real masters of the craft, but the technology's the real high point on this movie. Everything else is just borrowed and then turned up to 10 through the camera work, through the CGI work, through the use of 3D, and for the use of performance capture. Now, that's not entirely a bad thing, and the jokes I make at the top are real. This is a borrowed story. This is a borrowed biome setup. Everyone compares this Avatar to Avatar: The Last Airbender, especially now that we have sequels coming out showing air nomads. Sorry, James, but you're not fooling anybody. And maybe this is all just parallel thinking. I don't think that the setup of different biomes for different types of people within a race of aliens is that far out of the scope of things that we've seen even before The Last Airbender. But it is just very obvious that every aspect of this is borrowed. But let me not get too far into the weeds on the negatives, and I'd rather talk about the three things that I love about James Cameron's Avatar. The first thing on my list of things that I love about Avatar is actually Sam Worthington. And if you know my previous podcast, you're probably as shocked as I am that this one is on the chart. But having just recently watched his Terminator film and knowing the other kinds of movies he's going to be making in the interim between 2009 and now, I'm not the biggest fan of his, to say the least. He's kind of one of those like milquetoast white man actors that they just threw into anything. We had a running joke on Film Rescue where we just combined these guys into an amalgam human being that you could really swap any of them out and put them into each other's movies and nothing would change about the performance because they're all just there to play generic white dude POV learning about a new world. To be clear, that is what's happening in this movie, but this is Sam Worthington actually acting. He's more charming than I recalled. His charisma is actually able to shine through when you put him around a bunch of like stoic white military guys. He's actually able to shine a little bit. So I was kind of impressed by his performance, especially on my 2025 rewatch. Arguably, Zoe Saldana's doing the heavy lifting in this movie as she's not only explaining the world, but finding a love interest and going to war with an invading set of colonizers. All of that stuff plays even better than I remembered it, and maybe even makes the sequels a little weaker for it. I've seen the second one since this movie came out, and again, these are amazing things to behold, but the stories get a little weaker progressively, and if the trailers for the third one are any indicator, I doubt if that one's much stronger. Again, I'm a fan of James Cameron, but his Avatar series just isn't my cup of tea, so I want to compliment things when they really shine out to me, and Sam Worthington actually doing a pretty fucking good job in this one. I'll give him a thumbs up on that. The second thing that I really love about Avatar is that it's not afraid to be weird. This is a series and a movie specifically that kind of wears its sci-fi badge of honor on its sleeve. Cameron's been at this for decades at this point. He's always been pushing the bar as far as where things can go. And this is an era where he's willing to get a little kinky, to put it lightly. Having a full alien sex scene in the middle of your movie and treating it with honor and dignity and sensuality, that's a move that we don't really talk about as a move. Like, everyone knows it's in there. We made fun of the tail thing to no end, especially on YouTube era at the time. But I think the choice to do that, to even add that into your movie, is kind of brave. I won't lie. I was kind of impressed. I had forgotten it was in there entirely because I really don't revisit this one very often. Again, I've seen it so many times that it almost doesn't feel worth revisiting until I'm forced into that position. And suddenly, when I'm looking at it through 2025 eyes, I was like, oh, that's right. There's about to be an alien sex scene in this movie. And it even adds something cooler when you think about the ableism argument that could only be talked about in 2025, which is Sam Worthington's Sully is a disabled guy, and this is something he hasn't had access to in his life in quite a long time. So this moment isn't just touching because of his connection into a culture that is new to him. It's also touching in the fact that he hasn't been touched in a long time. Disabled people are still sexual people, and this is something that we don't display in our movies very often, especially not in a multi-million-dollar blockbuster, billion-dollar franchise. That's really, really cool. Now, there are other entanglements within this that are a little touchier for, I think, a white guy to get into, especially when we start to talk about the African tribes that the Na'vi are kind of filling in for within this story. You can see the impressions from other cultures on Earth that he's using within this film series. So maybe there's an aspect of like stolen racial valor alongside this disability thing. I'm not exactly the person to talk about this, but I did find it interesting that these things are coming up in, again, a broad released movie made for families functionally. Whether or not he handled all this well, I'll leave that up to the audience to decide, but just the fact that this conversation is here and not totally avoided, I think is kind of cool. I think that's something else that I want to give a thumbs up to in this movie, that he's willing to go there. And that willingness is an aspect of artistry. We usually talk about James Cameron as a technical director, but he's an artistic director as well, and these are the places where it can really shine. The third and final thing that I want to compliment about Avatar is unobtainium. Now, I might be losing some people on this one. There's something so funny to me about this era where we had adamantium and vibranium and unobtainium, and just using these funny made-up words as sci-fi filler. This is something Star Trek did all the time, also with Zoe Saldana, where they would just kind of add sci-fi nonsense to keep the story going. This is basically a fantasy element. You might as well say magic here for any other term, but unobtainium specifically having unobtainable within its root is so funny to me, because the metaphor that the movie's going for is right on its face, right? Like, these are colonizers and they're going to another planet to strip it of its resources, something that they can't obtain on Earth anymore. And so the fact that it is by definition unobtainable means that this is a doomed mission to start with. Sully's choice to switch sides is actually very intelligent as soon as he hears what they're there to do is get something unobtainable. The movie almost flirts into this satirical meta angle of like doing everything short of winking at the audience and saying, you guys get this, right? Like, we don't need to like make up a thing and a bunch of powers for you guys to get on board. We're just gonna call it unobtainable materialum. It's like Upsidasium from Rocky and Bullwinkle, which is a very dated reference that no one will understand. That one's just for me. But what do you think? Does Avatar deserve its gold star that it carries, or is it maybe a little more overrated now that we're a couple decades away from it? We're going to stay in the sci-fi realm, but switch gears from big blue people into dark blue vampires and talk about one of my favorite underrated gems from 2010, Daybreakers. And as always, I will see you tomorrow.